And it says that on the day that God acts, those who honoured and feared God will be treasured and spared. Bear in mind, feared God is, we worked out way back, that it doesn't mean fear as in to cower in fear of, it just means have humility before God. So again, it's not a particularly high bar that these people need to measure up to. Today is a very big day because I have read the entire book of Malachi from the Old Testament, albeit again it's only 4 chapters, so it's not a massive thing. But this is the last book of the Old Testament, so that is it. With 170 episodes, the Old Testament with this is now finished. It's quite a good ending to the Old Testament, I think, actually, because it all wraps up quite nicely with a softer bit in there at some points, but pretty heavy as well, as you'll see. The main theme of this, I suppose you could say, is that God is sort of wrapping up what he's not happy about what's happened, with some particular emphasis on the priests who've led people astray and that sort of thing. So he talks about, basically, they sort of dropped the ball in doing substandard sacrifice, which interestingly, for the end of the Old Testament, ties all the way back to the beginning of the Old Testament with the story of Cain and Abel back in, 3 years ago. And I wasn't quite sure what Cain had done wrong, obviously murdering his brother. But in terms of the sacrifice part, it didn't seem obvious. But this talks about priests making substandard sacrifices, which would tie up very well with kind of what Cain's problem was. He talks about the priests had done a bad job guiding the people, saying that your teachings have caused many to stumble. I guess that ties in with everything we read about the Levites. Didn't do a particularly good job or anything like that. He condemns particularly unfaithfulness to wives, talking about wives for men as the one he should protect. So that's definitely, people have not done very well there. He condemns also not paying tithes and doing offerings. You know, that was all pretty explicit with Moses and all the rest of it, what you had to do, and people just haven't been doing it. And condemning as well people saying things like, it is futile to serve God. That's an interesting one, isn't it? Because, I mean, in the context there, when God's doing a lot of stuff, it seemed pretty clear you do right, you get the good stuff. And you think of that in the context of now, though, it's not obvious that serving God delivers good stuff. And for the prophets, certainly, I mean, a lot of them had pretty horrible time of it. So it's difficult to look at that in a realistic context, if you see what I mean. In terms of, you can sort of see why people might think it's futile to serve God, because you can't even be sure he exists or anything like that. But yeah, that's a bit of an interesting one. There's an interesting bit in chapter 3, verse 1, which I shall read. So for that, we're going to need the big birthday Bible, big, beautiful birthday Bible even. And we're going to need the keeper of the book. And in this, God says, I will send my messenger who will prepare the way before me. Then suddenly the Lord you are seeking will come to his temple. The messenger of the covenant whom you desire will come, says the Lord Almighty. I guess in the context of everything we've read so far, that reads a lot like John the Baptist and Jesus coming. So, yeah, quite a good note on which to end all of that. But we do then end on some lighter notes. So God is saying, return to me and I will return to you, which is, that sort of makes sense. That's certainly the theme of the Old Testament, that God's trying to get his people to come back to him and they don't do it. What him returning to them means, but I guess that's sort of perhaps in terms of looking after them. And it says that on the day that God acts, those who honoured and feared God will be treasured and spared. Bear in mind, feared God is, we worked out way back, that it doesn't mean fear as in to cower in fear of, it just means have humility before God. So again, it's not a particularly high bar that these people need to measure up to. And then to round this off nicely, I thought actually chapter 4 of Malachi is quite short, so I thought actually I would just read it. It's quite a good mixture of tone, so hopefully useful. And this is headed Judgment and Covenant Renewal. So chapter 4, surely the day is coming, it will burn like a furnace. All the arrogant and every evildoer will be stubble, and that day that is coming will set them on fire, says the Lord Almighty. Not a root or branch will be left to them. But for you who revere my name, the Sun of Righteousness will rise with healing in its rays. and you will go out and frolic like well-fed calves. Then you will trample on the wicked. They will be ashes under the soles of your feet on the day when I act, says the Lord Almighty. Remember the law of my servant Moses, the decrees and laws I gave him at Horeb for all Israel. See, I will send the prophet Elijah to you before that great and dreadful day of the Lord comes. He will turn the hearts of the parents to their children and the hearts of the children to their parents, or else I will come and strike the land with total destruction. So, yeah, that is the end of the Old Testament. That's quite a nice sort of wrapping up. You almost wonder, could you just have read that bit? Probably got the whole idea. Tomorrow I'm doing the live event, so I will do a whole summary of the Old Testament in its totality after that, just in case anything interesting comes up as that I need to factor in. And then otherwise, for the timing wise, we go into a 400-year gap here. So at this point, Persia is basically ruling Jerusalem and all the rest of it. We then will have Alexander the Great and the Greek Empire comes along and basically whacks them. That's why Jesus ends up reading the Septuagint in Greek. So the whole Greek thing is very much baked into the culture of that time. And that explains why. Before Jesus arrives, the Romans then come, obviously, and they kick the Greeks out. And so they take over. And then we pick up 400 years later with the arrival of Jesus. But yeah, so that is the Old Testament. That's the last page 962. And I guess sort of mixed feelings on finishing that. So there's some relief, definitely, and some fatigue, I suppose. That's 3 months of filming done in a fortnight to try and get this done in time. Hugely grateful to those of you who've been there along the way, and it's been really interesting chatting about all this stuff. Where there are a few people who have actually watched all of these, which is quite amazing, listening to my rantings and ramblings as I'm trying to figure this stuff out. I said I will do a full summary of the whole Old Testament as in terms of the big picture. But yeah, if you're around tomorrow for the live event, it'd be great to see you and see what you think. It's going to be an interactive thing with lots of conversation, which is basically why I put this on here. It's the most interesting thing, I think, to talk about, and gets rid of any sort of risk of small talk, that sort of terrible thing. But yeah, so next brief summary, and then we'll be on to the New Testament and see if that helps clarify things or just makes it more confusing.